then I'm gonna hit record. Will you watch the Q&A? Good morning, folks.
Hi, everyone. Welcome.
We're going to give folks a few seconds to jump on in. So thank you for being so prompt. Give you guys an extra minute here. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I have a feeling we'll have other folks coming in. I'm Mindy Craig with Bluepoint Planning. We are supporting CDFA and helping to manage some of the outreach and engagement and working with them on this listening session. So I'll be helping to moderate as we go through today. And my colleague Alicia Sandoval will be doing note-taking, and Haley Rada, who's also on the team, will also be helping out on this. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And Justice, why don't we go ahead and share our screen? So today we are sharing out information on the climate resilience strategy for agriculture. And we are going to be asking for some input here. Today, all of you are part of a webinar. And so we're going to request that you ask questions through the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. You'll see it should say Q&A there. And that's going to be where we'll be able to take questions and answer them as we go through today. And I think we can chat out to you guys. I'm not sure if you have that on your side. And we're hoping to get as much feedback, but also provide a tool called Mentimeter during this process, and we'll share that and how to use that as we're going through it. And if you have any problems with that technology, you're welcome to just put your thoughts and comments based on those into the question and answer. So we'll bring that up again when we get there, because we do want to make sure we get all of your voice. And then there will also be at the end, we'll have our emails and some other information that if you want to send additional comments, because there's a lot of in detail here, additional comments or thoughts, we'll welcome those after today's meeting. So appreciate, again, your coming here. So today we're really trying to get that input on the strategy. Oh, can you go back, Haley? The input on the strategy that represents the needs of the agricultural community. We are trying to get some feedback on a proposed strategic framework for the strategy, these key topic areas that have been developed, and some new equity objectives that we're embedding into the strategy. These sessions will be incorporated into a draft that will then be open for public comment in summer of 2025, which is this summer. It is 2025. It's hard to believe, but here we are. Okay, next slide. So after we do our introductions, we'll have a presentation that goes over the context and the purpose of the strategy, who it's for and why, an overview of that climate strategy. It's pretty detailed, and so we're going to give a fairly high level explanation. And so in that section, there's going to be opportunities for you to ask additional questions. And as I mentioned, those equity objectives are also going to be explored and discussed as well. And then we'll go over our next steps. And then we'll continue to answer questions as we go through it. I think probably we'll have some moments in this where we're going to pause and let you have some feedback. So we'll pause through the presentation, but then we'll have time at the end to have some more back and forth in terms of things that you might want to talk about further. All right, next slide. Okay, I want to turn it over to the CDFA staff who are here with us, Virginia Jamison and Dr. Nina Bingham, who will be leading our efforts. And maybe Virginia and Nina, do you want to quickly introduce yourselves, and maybe starting with Virginia?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mindy. Hi, everybody. I'm Virginia Jameson. I'm the Deputy Secretary for Climate and Working Lands at the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and just really appreciate you being here today, and great to see so many familiar names. Over to you, Nina.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nina Bingham. I'm a senior environmental scientist with CDFA, and I work on all things climate. And Just echoing Virginia's comments, we're really happy everybody's here today to start sharing out and hearing input from you. So thanks for coming.
Okay, so I believe this slide is mine, and I'm going to be telling you all about how CDFA came to be doing this strategy. So next slide, please. So in 2022, CDFA released a document called Ag Vision for the Next Decade. Ag Vision, with many of you may be familiar with, is a vision setting process that first started in 2008 under the leadership of the State Board of Food and Agriculture. And it's since then undergone several updates. Sorry, of course, I lose my voice as we start a webinar. And this one here, Ag Vision for the Next Decade, is the most recent. This document was formulated with input from the board, a task force it created, and with roundtable discussions with stakeholders, including farmers and ranchers, processors, supply chain partners, small and underserved producers, nonprofit representatives, and discussions with other state agencies. So that Ag Vision document described a number of key priorities to drive the work of CDFA and serve as a catalyst for collaboration and partnership. The document named the first priority as fostering climate smart, resilient, and regenerative food systems. We have this document up on our website, and in a moment here, I'll put it in the chat so you can easily find it and check it out for yourselves. But basically, this is kind of the impetus for doing this, working to foster a climate smart, resilient, and regenerative food system as outlined in the vision. And the department and various state agencies are already undertaking work to support this priority, much of which you all are probably aware of. However, there is not currently a single document or strategy that encompasses all of what it will take to get there. So we want to create that. Okay, next slide is yours, Nina.
So as Virginia mentioned, it's important for us to then, in putting together this climate resilience strategy, we're going to pull from our previous efforts and build from there. So I just want to cover some of our previous efforts. This work includes the Farmer Equity Report, the Climate Change Consortium for Specialty Crops, the Farmer and Rancher-led Climate Change Solutions. Our Farmer Equity Report identifies 4 challenges and a suite of solutions to build resilience for our underserved and often most vulnerable farmers and ranchers. Our Climate Change Consortium for Specialty Crops focuses on describing climate-related challenges and potential solutions for specialty crop growing. This is especially focused on changing temperatures, water resources, and pest and pollination challenges. Lastly, our Farmer and Rancher-led Climate Solutions highlights input from our growers on methods to build climate resilience. This is emphasizing strategies for main commodity categories of dairies and ranching, perennial crops, and annual crops. So each of these reports documents a subset of challenges and actions critical to climate resilience for agriculture. Next slide. So this climate resilience strategy is designed to present a comprehensive picture of what is needed to build resilience in agriculture. This includes incorporation of the previous work as mentioned, but also adding in new components to consider, including workforce and economic needs and opportunities, soil and animal health, air quality considerations, and energy needs, and more. The intention is for this document to present a one-stop shop for understanding the challenges, state actions to address these challenges, and then the needed work to continue to build resilience across all elements of agriculture for our state. Next slide.
Thanks, Nina. So what are our intentions here? It is our intention to create a strategy that is representative of the needs of the agricultural community, and one that embeds equity and inclusivity, that reflects what has already been accomplished, incorporates activities that are underway, and that provides a pathway for building resilience in agriculture. We are hoping this process will help us better understand where to undertake future actions and make investments for the most impact. Next slide. And this is yours, Nina.
Yeah, the target audiences for our strategy include our agricultural community, our nonprofit and business partners, and the general public and our state's legislature and our state agency partners. You can see we're representing this as a circle here because we know our audiences are connected and there's feedback and information sharing that we're hoping this strategy can help facilitate between our audiences. We view this strategy as an opportunity to reflect the needs of our agricultural communities to provide actionable strategies for our nonprofit and business partners doing important on-the-ground work, inform the public and our policymakers of work being done, and identify where gaps exist and help connect state agencies working on the vast array of agricultural topics. Next slide. So before we dive into the content of this strategy, I want to describe our intended timeline. We started this strategy last spring with CDFA staff creating drafts for topic sections in the strategy. We also hosted an information gathering session through the CDFA's Science Advisory Panel. And this has public meetings on a quarterly basis on topics related to agriculture and environmental sustainability. During that 2-day session in May, we heard from the panel on topics that they would like to see included and also heard from experts on various topics. We began drafting the strategy based on that input and then circulated a draft for review by our state agency colleagues this past fall. Since then, we've been making edits based on their feedback, and we are also entered into a contract with Blue Point Planning to help us with the document and process. We're now conducting sessions like this one in an effort to further solicit information from you as we continue to refine our draft. And it's our hope that we'll have a draft ready for your review and public comment this spring 2025. Next slide. So we can start with considering the motivation behind this strategy, looking at the context of California agriculture today, and why resilience against the effects of climate change is really important. Next slide. Our agricultural industry is strong. In 2022, it boasted $59 billion in sales and accounted for 11% of the total U.S. agricultural sales. And our state's growers produce 1/3 of the nation's vegetables and 3/4 of the nation's fruits and nuts. Our unique geography and our climate, coupled with infrastructure and innovation by our farmers and ranchers, make California a specialty crop force. Our state has over 400 different commodities. And who's growing and producing our food? Most of our state growers come from small family farms, and about 2/3 of our farms are less than 150,000 annually. This means that although we have an incredibly strong agricultural industry, we also need to acknowledge the challenges and vulnerabilities facing our farmers and ranchers and work to uplift and support solutions. Next slide. One major challenge we're all facing is climate change. In California, this generally means warming temperatures and less predictable and more variable precipitation. We can call it weather whiplash. Changing climate is really driving a myriad of weather-related disasters, including periods of drought, extreme heat events, flooding, wildfire, and more. Next slide. These climate hazards, they cause our farmers and ranchers to really feel the effects of the changing climate, and this is through things like increased pest pressure, heat stress on plants and animals and people. We have less water availability, degradation of our natural resources, such as soil, water, and air, and we have higher energy demands. And these are all factors contributing to an increasingly challenging environment to produce food and fiber. Next slide. So this precarious environment can result in worsening yields and/or product and crop losses, increasing production costs, driving narrower and narrower profit margins, less land for agricultural production, and increasingly negative animal and human health effects. And this is what's just driving an urgency for our work and making it clear we need a cohesive path forward to support our agricultural industry and agricultural communities in building resiliency to the effects of climate change and drive towards meeting our goal of a climate smart, resilient, and regenerative food system. Next slide.
Okay. So when people hear about climate change action by the state, they are often thinking about emissions reduction efforts, and there are many of those that are underway. So for many years, the state of California has established laws and targets related to climate action. Many of you may be familiar with AB 1279, which sets a goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2035 or 2045. Sorry, I've got a typo in my notes. That legislation built on AB 32, which set California's first emissions reductions targets and established the scoping plan process at the California Air Resources Board, as well as the emissions inventory process, which is how CARB tracks progress on emissions, such as those you can see here in this graphic. And you can see agriculture there in yellow representing 8% of California's emissions. Another law that plays a big role is SB 1383, which sets a target for methane reduction specifically. And that's 40% below 2013 levels by 2030. And then most recently, AB 1757, which set targets for the implementation of nature-based solutions on all landscape types in California, including croplands and grasslands. However, emissions reductions are not the full story. As Nina discussed, agriculture is already experiencing negative impacts as a result of climate change and is already enacting adaptive and resilience building measures to address those impacts. Personally, I see it as our job to not only make sure that we are meeting our goals related to emissions reductions, but also helping ensure that we are facilitating and fostering a climate resilient food system into the future. Next slide, please. So now we're going to get into an overview of the sections of our strategy as we've been working on them so far. I'd really like to preface this by saying that agriculture, as you all know, is very complicated, and there are many cross-cutting issues that come up in many different combinations and circumstances. And so just organizing the strategy has already been a bit of a challenge, just figuring out what goes where and the logical order of things. So that said, I am sure that there are things that we have not gotten right so far, or ways of organizing that could be better, and we are really counting on you all to provide feedback. There will be things that we have forgotten and still need to include. And so we are humbly asking you to consider what we are covering so far and make sure you know that there's still plenty of opportunity for input. And so as we go forward today, please share with us what is really important for you to see in the strategy. Please share if there's something you have personally done or experienced or know of that would be helpful for others in agriculture to know about. And we're just really looking forward to your feedback. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back to Nina, who's going to tell us about the overarching framework so far.
Next slide, I think. Okay, so at the highest level, we've identified 3 themes needed for resilience. This is to support a thriving and resilient food sector, protection for natural systems critical to agriculture, and the encouragement for the adoption of resilient agricultural practices. Within each of these main themes is a suite of topics, and as Virginia indicated, we know the inherent interconnectedness of these topic areas, so while we may cover a specific topic under one theme, we are also looking for any place to highlight the connection of one topic to another theme or one topic to another topic. Next slide. Within each topic area, we will cover 6 elements, including a description of the related challenges driven by climate change, summarizing the landscape of plans and policies shaping the direction of state action, a comprehensive review of current state actions by the state. With this element, I just want to acknowledge that there's currently and has been a lot of really important work being done by our federal, local, nonprofit, and private stakeholders, and this work is essential for building resilience, but within the scope of this strategy, we're going to focus on summarizing work done by the state and partnerships with the state. We will also focus, though, on opportunities for future actions, and in this category, we are looking for opportunities that can be adopted by the state, but also by partners outside of the state. This strategy is designed to serve all of our agricultural community, and as part of this effort, we're going to take a focused look on equity considerations relevant to each topic. And lastly, each topic will include a set of case studies, which can cover deep dives on specific challenge or exemplary resilience work. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to get into basically going through each topic for our strategy, and we're going to run through a list of different topics, and we're going to then ask for some input afterwards. So our first theme includes topics which support a thriving and resilient food sector. Within this theme, we have 6 topics, so get ready to take in some information. For each topic, we're going to be presenting the main objective and then looking for your input on agreement with the theme and the main objectives, but also what's important to this topic area for you and what's missing. Our first topic area is farm economy. We've seen the margins for farmers and ranchers get slimmer and slimmer, and we know that climate change is only compounding these economic challenges. And in this section, we're looking to leverage technology, tools, and innovations to help transform our food system and build resilience in the farm economy. We're going to describe the drivers of financial pressures and the effects of climate change and explore how circular economies, procurement opportunities, and voluntary markets, in addition to innovative tools and technologies, may bolster the farm economy and build in resilience to the effects of climate change. We next focus on our water system and how we can work on building sustainability and reliability in water use and access to ensure a resilient food system. The conveyance of water across the state, coupled with sustainable groundwater use, is critical to California agriculture. Climate change presents a threat to the state's water resources and, by extension, then our food system. This section describes the role of agriculture in ensuring the sustainability of California's water supply by protecting existing infrastructure and using water efficiently. We explore such opportunities as flood-managed aquifer recharge and also the continued development of water efficiency programs. Workforce is also critical to enacting resilience-building actions, but our agricultural workforce, including farm workers, face climate-driven worsening working and living conditions. Many of our agricultural communities are also vulnerable to the effects of climate change. To support the agricultural workforce health and well-being, this chapter highlights state actions and opportunities to uplift communities, build on-farm resilience plans, improve working conditions for farm workers, and facilitate routes to higher-paying jobs to the existing and highly skilled workforce. We also highlight the critical need for technical assistance and explore avenues for growing the climate-smart technical assistance workforce through training and job opportunities. Next slide. Dairy, livestock, and poultry are some of our top commodities in the state. However, these animals are very vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Heat stress and increased disease pressures can lead to widespread animal mortality events. I know we're all in the midst of a very challenging battle against avian influenza in our state and across the country, and we are all feeling the significant negative consequences of this outbreak. And this only stresses the importance of uplifting our disease tracing and emergency response efforts, but also promoting preparedness and preparation efforts for future disease outbreaks or adverse weather events. This chapter will drive home our mission of protecting animal health and welfare by covering our current actions in agriculture and also exploring several opportunities to increase our preparedness and disaster response. While this strategy is predominantly focusing on state-level efforts, it's important to acknowledge the needed engagement and collaboration across scales to affect real and impactful change. Rather than face these challenges alone, the next chapter describes current and potential collaborations with jurisdictions around science, tools, and technology for building resilience to climate change. Our last topic within the supporting a thriving and resilient food sector theme is energy. Energy is a critical input to every part of the food supply chain, from water conveyance to traditional on-farm equipment such as pumps, tractors, and harvesters, to further down the supply chain with food processing warehouses and refrigerated trucks that carry food to stores and distribution centers. The state has set electrification targets for the agricultural industry, 25% by 2030 and 75% by 2045, that necessitate electrification of operations, enhanced energy efficiency, and resilient sources of renewable energy and energy storage. This chapter will speak to the current and future efforts and opportunities to help advance resilient energy for farming operations, including on-site generation of electricity and fuel, vehicle and equipment upgrades, infrastructure needs for grid connectivity and on-site storage, and continued energy efficiency programs, and more. Now we will move to the first feedback portion of our listening session. This is going to be moderated by Point Blue Planning, and we'll use our feedback tool, Mentimeter.
Great, thanks, Nina. So this is the chance for you guys to start to get involved here. And what we're going to do is, I believe we have sent in the chat is the link to this. You can also use your phone, and that's a really easy way so you don't have to mess up your browser. Use your phone and just take a picture of the QR code. It's going to take you to a new site. And it will bring you pretty much to this same exact screen. This is like a voting tool, which is great. And so we're going to give you a couple of questions on the stuff that you just heard, and we'll do this at each section. So I'm just going to pause here for just a second so people can get that going. And if anybody has an issue, please let us know. And then while we're letting people do that, maybe we can answer this question from Martin. Are there any areas of focus support for small and organic farmers, particularly those selling direct to consumers? They often hold the biodiversity ecosystem services and know how to address the multi-crisis included in climate, especially during outbreaks and emergencies. And I don't know if Nina or Virginia, you had a thought on that, or if that's in the thing, and we'll answer that question and we'll jump into the Métis.
Yeah, sure. So some examples of past programs that have done that are continuing to do that are our organic transition program out of our Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation. And then we also have our Farm to School program, which I believe prioritizes organic production and farms using climate smart ag practices. So those are the types of programs that we definitely want to talk about in our strategy. But if there are other ideas that you all have beyond existing programming, we definitely want to hear about that as part of this strategy process.
Great, thanks, Virginia. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll switch to the next slide. So Virginia and Nina went over that pillar, that first part. What do you see is missing from that? We're going to go into two other ones. So it's around this idea of that thriving and resilient food sector. Was there anything that you felt like, hey, this isn't missing, or making sure that we should include it? So this is an opportunity you guys can write along, answer. Obviously, if you're having any challenges, again, with the tool, you can put it into the Q&A and we'll just hold that as a comment for later. But this is our first opportunity to do that. Great, plant health. And I'm assuming when we see in invasive species introductions, is how do we address those? Competition at the international level. Okay, great. Yeah, there is an element. We'll talk later about coordinating and partnering with international. So that's the other side of it, is that competition. Alternative crops based on climate. Great, thank you. That's good. Financing mechanisms and levers to reduce the risk. Okay. A question, is energy just used in California, or included energy use outside of the state, either in inputs or used as California ag bioenergy? Virginia or Nina, do you want to try and answer that while we're gathering these other?
I can give it a shot. I'm not an expert in this, but our intention for the strategy is to primarily consider things that we have an opportunity to influence, which is going to be mostly what occurs inside our state. So when we hear from you all, not only can we, use your input to put in this strategy, but we can also have discussions with our state agency colleagues about what we're hearing. So yes, definitely focusing on what's happening here in California would be helpful.
Great. There's some other good comments here. So infrastructure and other support for farmers markets. So that's a great one. Considering genetics within all of this and how that's being addressed. High infrastructure costs. And I'm curious on the person who said high infrastructure costs, and maybe you can add another note, is that on like road infrastructure? Is that on the getting supplies to and from places? Is it on the farm itself? Maybe you can get a little more detail on that. That'd be helpful. And maybe it's stormwaters and all sorts of other things, but there's a lot in that. Workforce development, connected to that other one right above it, agricultural education, high school, community college programs. Regenerative farm cures all factors of climate change. Great. And there's a couple. We spent a great deal of January continuing ed farmer detention that has little purpose. High energy transportation, durable goods, purchase water based on infrastructure costs. Thank you for that addition. Okay, great. This is really helpful. And we'll do this for each pillar. So as you're hearing and listening to Virginia and Nina, we'll have that opportunity for each one. So thinking about like what is missing on that. And I see the one that just popped up on reducing barriers to having legal migrant workers, equity programs that support Spanish language resources. Thank you. We're going to be talking about that when we talk about the equity objectives, is something that we really want to address. Appreciate that. And yes, incentives for farmers to transition to organic practices. Great. Appreciate that. Okay, great. And people can keep on commenting, and obviously continue. If you have larger questions, feel free to put that in the Q&A. All right, so let's go to the next slide. All right, we're going to hit the next pillar. And that pillar, I might have to remind people of that. I think this is Virginia or Nina. You're on, there you go.
I think this one is Nina, actually, sorry. But I can do it if you would like, Nina.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead, go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so going back to the pillars, so this theme is under the category of supporting a thriving and resilient food sector. Am I in the right slide? No. Oh, I must be in the wrong slide. Okay, sorry guys, I'm gonna have to wing it just a little bit, but this is, hold on, sorry. Okay, so this second pillar is protecting natural systems that are critical to agriculture. And the first one of these is really near and dear to my heart. This is about conserving farmland. And as many of you probably know, in the state of California, we see the loss of between 40 and 50,000 acres of farmland per year. That's the average rate of loss since our state started measuring farmland loss. There are a number of activities that the state supports already, like conservation easements and planning grants to local governments, the Williamson Act. So there are many ways that we are attempting to address the loss of farmland, and we're really curious to hear what other ideas you all have. You'll probably know that land use in California is very much happening at the local level. We are curious to hear what else you think can be done. So on the second pillar, deploying, and we also have deploying sustainable, adaptable, and integrated pest management. And this has to do with an objective of managing pests and plant diseases and noxious weeds through sustainable and integrated pest management practices. We have recently completed last year the roadmap to sustainable pest management, and many of you were probably part of that process. So it will be discussion of that, but also looking into what needs we have around research, technical assistance, and investments in new strategies for pest detection and eradication. And then finally, we have boosting biodiversity on farmland. And so this one, we know that the climate and biodiversity crises are very much intertwined. And we know that there are already many strategies that farmers and ranchers are taking to boost biodiversity on their lands and protect species and provide habitat. And there are some things that the state has offered already. For example, we have a pollinator habitat program at CDFA that received funding a couple of years ago, and we gave out grants for that that supported things like hedgerows and cover crops. But there may be other strategies that you all are aware of that we could be implementing and uplifting. Okay, so I think now we're going back to the Mentimeter.
Unmute myself. So again, here's the same idea, protecting natural systems, critical to agriculture. What is missing from this? Some of the points above may be applicable here, but again, just what are some things that we should be thinking about or really important to you in this? I know you're not reading all the detail here, so there's just some things that this is an opportunity to share your priorities. Okay, I don't know where it goes, but agrovitalics, okay, great. All right, we have. So we have a question in the Q&A. I'll read to that. Hey, everyone, I'm new to California. I just joined the American Farmland Trust California team as the Senior California Policy Manager. So apologies if this question is naive, no worries. Does CDFA have the ability to purchase farmland on the open market, protect it and lease it? Or the ability to give out our grants for land trusts, municipals, tribes to create their own revolving loan funds?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And no, CDFA does not. The programs that exist in the state, for example, there's a number of farmland protection programs at the California Department of Conservation, and that includes the California Farmland Conservancy Program, the Sustainable Ag Lands Conservation Program, and a variety of planning grant programs. And so they will work with private entities to buy conservation easements. And so then those entities can resell the land with an easement on it. So the state is not itself purchasing farmland and reselling it, but it's facilitating that kind of transaction with permanent conservation easements.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, and we have some really good comments going in here. So prioritizing working with counties that have active HCPs and funding strategies. Field sanitation is a key thing. That was the Angel Navel Orangeworm. Thank you on that. Implement farmland mitigation programs, such as farmland mitigation programs that require developers to compensate for the conversion of ag land, more energy efficiency irrigation systems, the carbon farm plans, many of which include increasing biodiversity. If I miss yours, I'm not reading it because it's not important. Just so you know, I'm just hitting a highlights here. We have lots of food. Low commodity prices reflect this. We are short on houses. Maybe keeping farmland from growing houses is not a good idea. Funding for cover crop seeds. There's one longer here on regenerative farming is missing, as these practices will increase biodiversity, reduce pests with companion planting and biodiversity. Regenerative agriculture, it creates a balance. Increase collaboration with funders in the foundation sector to support the increase of funds in conservation easements. Farmland transition, absentee landowners should be factored in as one consideration here. Keep going down if we could. We should work with local and state governments to prioritize urban intensification as opposed to urban sprawl and development plans. And then reduce the barriers on funding availability for conservation easements to support the whole purchase cost of farmland. Strategic land fallowing. There you go. Great comments. And there are some good things, like some of that local, working with local jurisdictions maybe connects here, but also in our next pillar when we talk a little bit more about those partnerships. So that's great. Prioritizing technical assistance for succession planning. So that helps to move things along. That's great. Okay. Again, keep on adding those thoughts. And you can again add more into the Q&A if you want to. Let's hit the next slide and get to pillar 3.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, this is really fun to listen to what everyone has to say. Okay, so the third theme that we've identified is encouraging resilient agricultural practices. So we have 4 topics so far under this theme, which is about practices that can be enacted on the farm or ranch to protect and bolster environmental health and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Objective 10 is about supporting the reduction of air pollutants. This section will describe investments made by the Air Resources Board in programs like Farmer, the Funding Agricultural Replacement Measures for Emissions Reductions Program, which provides funding through local air districts for agricultural harvesting equipment, heavy-duty trucks, agricultural pump engines, tractors, and other equipment. It will discuss on-farm practices that can reduce dust, like cover cropping and low dust harvesting equipment. And we're interested in hearing what would be helpful and supportive to the agricultural community to continue these efforts. Next, we have advancing climate smart and healthy soils practices. Those terms can be used somewhat interchangeably, but in general, they refer to practices that build soil organic matter, sequester carbon, and provide resiliency benefits like increasing soil water holding capacity. This is a place where the state has set a target of 3 million acres of cropland to be using healthy soils practices by 2045, which means that we need to figure out how to increase the rate of adoption, whether through incentives, technical assistance programming, ecosystem and carbon credits, demonstration of benefits for crop yields and soil health, and any other ideas that you all have. Okay, next slide. Next, we have ranching sustainability. There is, of course, quite a bit of work happening throughout the state to demonstrate what can be achieved through livestock grazing, and that includes fuel reductions to prevent wildfires, both on and off ranch, rotational and prescribed grazing to increase forage quality and encourage plant and soil health, reforestation of oak woodlands and riparian restoration. But also, we're really interested in hearing about efforts for reducing enteric emissions. We know there are vaccinations being developed and breeding programs underway, but interested in hearing what more you may know. And then finally, for dairy sustainability, this is an area where the state and the dairy industry have done quite a bit of work to incentivize practices that reduce methane, from alternative manure management practices to anaerobic digesters to research into ways of managing enteric emissions. But there's more to do. So again, your thoughts would be very much appreciated. And now I believe we have another Mentimeter.
All right, I think you guys have it down now. What are some of the things that are missing that you, and again, missing and or you want to make sure to highlight, bring up, raise up in this process?
And if I could just comment while folks are thinking about it, we know it's kind of hard to keep track of the pillars that we're talking about and the way we're trying to organize it. We are going to put this PowerPoint on our website after this. So if you have a chance to look at it later and you want to think about what should be where, I mean, this again was a tricky thing. And so we're interested in your feedback about document organization too.
Let's see, we have a question online from Alexei. This also may be a naive question. There are no naive questions. All questions are great. But are these initiatives to be funded by the state through grants? If not, what are thoughts on how the practices will be paid for? Nina, do you want to, or Virginia, want to share that live?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in some cases, we have initiatives that are funded by the state. But there are also things that might be market mechanisms or, other systems that can be set up besides either state funding for activities or incentives. We have those things. And in the near future, we're lucky to have funding from Proposition 4 that voters approved, and CDFA got a number of different programs funded that way. So in the not too distant future, you'll see more funding for the Healthy Soils Program, the State Water Efficiency and Enhancement Program, some mobile farmers markets, tribal food sovereignty. So there are some things coming down the pike, but maybe you all have ideas about what else would be helpful.
Yeah, and I'll just add to some of the questions I'm seeing or the comments here, which are great. And one of the things Nina and Virginia have been doing is not only documenting in this strategy all the things the state is doing, but looking at those opportunities for the future and what the state should be considering and thinking about. So it's really helpful on some of these. And if you guys have more information you want to share or a great model product or a program, please go ahead and we can send that email afterwards. We'd love to hear it, because we are going to have case studies throughout the strategy that says, hey, these are things that might be happening or somewhere else, or we should be thinking about in the future. So that's really great. So just kind of the highlights here: to explore payment for ecosystem services, expanding the carbon credit system to make them more accessible to the agronomic practices. There's a 99-year standard makes it challenging. Getting management plans and on-farm technical assistance to new communities and geographies and support adoption in communities geographically. They need to be more accessible. Accessibility sounds like it's an ongoing comment here, and having these things open to everybody. Reducing barriers to develop carbon farm plans. Ensure the Healthy Soils program is available and made easily accessible to urban producers. So common thing, accessibility, expanding this. Regenerative farming, keeping that on top of mind. More block program. The block grant program currently excludes people from even applying. So how does that get more equitable? Incentives to help with dust mitigation and lower emissions equipment and infrastructure. Great. Creation of funding of ag innovation hubs that are demonstrating and researching practices in our real farms where farmers and others can visit and learn. Great ideas. Supporting education and funding to reduce fertilizer and pesticide runoff into groundwater. That kind of that whole idea of demonstration continues to go there. More removal of barrier for access. And increase in consistent funding for resource conservation districts. Important to understand that not all practices are applicable to all solutions. So having different understandings and that nuances, and that's where all you guys come in because you are literally on the ground. So thank you. Funding mechanisms that encourage continued implementation of practices, not just the new ones. So that's a really important one, having that continue on. Fantastic. Okay, great. Funding organizations that already work with new and beginning farmers to support their skills. Great. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so I think this is me. So I think we go to the next slide here. So one of the things that is important is this idea and how we integrate equity into the strategy. And I think one thing that's really important to recognize is that CDFA is one of many state agencies that is participating in offering programs. And so this equity objectives are the goals and what we want to strive for. There isn't sort of a mandate here. Just wanted to sort of allow that. This is the intent here is to help all agencies, and particularly CDFA, to evaluate and develop more equitable initiatives and policies for the agricultural industry. So a lot of the comments we just heard in some of those Mentimeters sort of get to this. It is really increasing the ability for us to have good conversations. And when we're designing programs or plans and policy development, how can we do that with accessibility, with affordability, and some of these key elements in mind? And so we don't miss that piece. So this is going to be an element within the strategy that hopefully will also be used for the future to have those conversations to develop future programs. So go ahead, let's go to the, so we have identified in the next slide, 6 areas for potential equity objectives. And we are really building on this. And so this is where we'd love to hear your thoughts, again, on what we're missing and what is not here. So we have thought about equity within these 8 areas. I just kind of keep on saying 6 areas. So financial viability, just transition and capacity, accessibility, and that's a big one. And we're going to go a little more detailed in all of these. Health and well-being, accountability and transparency, and cultural relevancy. Each one of these has different questions and different considerations that we're thinking about. And so we want to know what it means to you. So we're going to go through what the definition and what we've talked about means. And we want to hear again, does that make sense to you? Are we missing stuff? And what are those considerations we should be including as we're going through this? So next slide. Okay, first, and again, feel free to add your comments into the Q&A as we're going, and we'll also do a Mentimeter exercise here too. So financial viability, what we're meaning here is it's secure, inclusive initiative participation and financing for those who lease their land, who lack access to land, or have been underserved by programs. And just so you know, we're using initiative as a sort of a universal word that could mean program, policy, capital resources. It's sort of like our shorthand for that. So when we hear initiative, it means kind of all those things. And this is in response to things that we have heard and CDFA has heard, and the equity plan that they have developed has highlighted things around concerns for land tenure and shorter term leases, those very high upfront costs for land purchasing and a high cost of land leasing, and the difficulty to participating in these kind of programs and plans. And there's a lot of additional funding to achieve goals or may not have access to land to the start. So this is the sort of considerations that we want folks to start thinking about as they're designing those programs, those plans, those policies, just like people were identifying early on. Next. So this next objective is just transition capacity. So ensuring that farm workers and farmers who have been underserved by programs in the past are able to take part in the transition to climate adaptive agricultural practices. So I saw a couple of comments on the last one that sort of highlighted this already. It's about skills learning on regenerative agriculture, or it was on I'm going to try and to remember some of them, but there was one on like, how do we have small farmers have skills? So this whole idea of how do we make that transition to a stronger, more resilient climate agriculture is what we're trying to hit here. So it's one that will help workers transition to a climate smart food system with high road jobs. And that high road jobs means things that are not piecemeal, that they have a long-term capability to have a career, to have promotions and to count on it. And upskilling and training farmers to participate in all these different active and higher level energy and green resilient alternatives for agriculture. Next slide. Accessibility. Again, we saw a lot of these comments in the earlier Mentimeters. This is just really simple. We need to ensure there's equitable access to initiatives, trainings, and resources. So we've heard that they're really nice to have sort of this centering in the needs of underserved farmers. Also thinking about those beginner farmers and those farmers who are under-resourced. How can we have better considerations and flexibility around those applications and participations? We need to make sure that language is it's in all languages, so people can really understand this, and that also that it's easily available through different channels for advertisements. We need to make sure we get rid of jargon, and we're really working on that here and trying to make sure that this strategy is demonstrating that, but in all of our stuff, making sure that the programs are really easy to understand and we get that to be accessible. And that we have trusted partners for that TA, and that we have multiple places for training so that people don't have to travel long distances, that they can get to those more easily. Next slide. So health and well-being, this is really centering on the health of farm workers, especially as it relates to climate change impacts. So we know that with climate change, there are increased impacts and increased health risks that farmers are facing from extreme heat, pesticides, wildfire smoke, more and more, dust, particulate matter, and airborne illnesses and allergens. So how do we think we can be more equitable in our well-being of our farm workers, in those policies, and making sure that we have resources and care for undocumented workers? Next slide. Cultural relevancy. So really deliberately and respectfully honoring cultural traditions and history to maintain our cultural heritage from the past and present for the benefit of everybody. We recognize that farming and ranching is a long-standing field, and we have lots of different ethnic groups who are part of our ecosystem of farmers. And there's a lot of different culturally specific practices and the utilization of traditional ecological knowledge in their practices that we want to maintain and keep moving forward. So we want to make sure our initiatives are aimed at sustainable farming practice, incorporate this knowledge, and support those culturally relevant farming practices. Okay, I think our next slide is going to be, one more. This is an important one, right? Accountability and transparency. So we want to make sure that once we create these initiatives, there is a clear and transparent means to track and monitor that they are in fact being equitably implemented. So having metrics and means of saying we are succeeding or we're falling short on our goals. So if initiatives do aim to increase equity amongst our farmers who need assistance, but don't include those mechanisms, we recognize that they can lose their impact. So agencies must ensure that those equity actions are properly implemented, that we're following on them, and then we're sharing that information out to our community, which you guys are all part of. Okay, so this one is like a pulse. We just want to sort of first just capture how well are we capturing equity concerns in this sort of beginning framework. And it goes from a range of not well to very well. So this is a quick and easy one for everybody. And I'm going to ask, as you guys are voting here, to share maybe in our next slide, right? We have one, and the next slide is to maybe help us understand sort of where are those concerns or the benefits, and what could we do better, and how do we make sure that this is more effective. And I'd love as many of you who can, we have 42 of you on the phone, as many of you as possible who want to vote here, that'd be awesome. Give it a second. And again, if folks are still looking to join, you can also just go to menti.com and use the code that you see up on the screen, which is 69296059. And of course, we also welcome any questions on this. I'm going to give just a few seconds more here. So I'm kind of getting a better than average, but just sort of a little bit. So let's go to the next slide, and I'd love to hear what some of the folks, why that is and what is missing, and what other considerations should we include? What are some of the concerns that folks are feeling? Should have a consideration that every California can apply to all programs. Great, thank you. Any other thoughts? And some of the folks who were like, yeah, I'm not sure this is going to get there. Love to hear any feedback on that. And any other considerations that, you know, we haven't shared all the details that we're thinking about, but anything that you think as you're imagining that we should make sure to include. Okay, considering, are the payments actually covering the cost of the practice? Right. Okay, good. All agencies need to ensure that everyone can apply for programs. This is less equity, more accountability, but need to include scientific peer-reviewed evidence-based systems of tracking climate impacts across the whole thing. Okay, that's great. We can add that into the other element there. Land back opportunities for tribes, for farmers looking into land retirement. Considering this trauma towards government, like in the one community who lack trust, so trust building needs to happen first before we can implement other strategies. Very true, perfect, very, very important to know. CDFA should check back with actual growers, not just technical advisors, providers. Mid-sized growers are the ones getting lost. Many specialty crops excluded from the NRSC because of gross income limits. Okay, that's interesting. Broadening the definition of CDFR on programs to include gender, sexual orientation, etc. And we are including some of that. We've started adding that, so things on that one. Consider who produces how much and its value to the state, big, medium farms especially. Technical assistance are great, but need to come from community organizations already trusted. Great, thank you. Giving land back and listening to indigenous peoples who know these lands. Creation of land access division. Okay, so actually somebody who's all about that. Okay, great. Reach out to farmers to get feedback. Insurance funding for small farmer workers. Great. Ensuring there is support to hire community leaders that can support in building that trust with folks in specific communities. Partnering with tribes. Great. Very, very helpful. Okay, let's move to, I think, our next slide here. I want to just pause before we get to our next steps and see, are there any other questions on anything that we've offered? And I'll go through it. So I'm just going to tee that up. So if there's questions about anything that we have discussed here, love to hear, or comments, please go ahead and add those into the Q&A on your screen at the bottom. But for our next steps, let's go to that next slide. So this is a comment card that you can add more detail. So if you want to just, kind of have a lot of thoughts, much more than you would write on the Mentimeter slides, we're welcoming that. So you can, again, take a picture of that. You can also email the climate@cdfa.ca.gov, and we will also take that. We're going to continue to take all this input and feedback through the spring of 2025. After that, we're going to be refining the strategy, and then we'll have another round in the summertime. So this is just the first phase, or it's actually, there's been ongoing conversation. So this is maybe kind of the second phase, if you will, of ongoing engagement. And then we'll have more after that. Okay, so as you guys are marking that, I'm going to go to our questions. We have one from Connie. Are there any types of organizations, people that you need help getting access to round out this effort? How can we best help get them to you? Oh, that's an excellent question, Connie. Thank you. Because one of the things I would love, and this is a short term, there's a couple things. One, we have another session today at 5 o'clock. That we would welcome anybody who you want to have share and hear this information. We also have another one tomorrow at 9 a.m. So we have 2 more of these listening sessions. We'll do the similar spiel at people's feedback and access. So welcome that. We're also going and meeting with a lot of different groups throughout the state. There's a meeting on February 13th as a science advisory panel that's going to be on block grants, FYI for folks. And we would also, if you have a group or an organization that you think we could come and present to, please email us, or you could drop it into the chat or into the QA. We're really interested in talking to folks and getting input. So we're really open and welcoming any sort of thing. So we'll be popping into different meetings, giving 5 to 10 minute presentations, as well as this more extended one. Did I miss anything on the outreach? I know we have a lot coming up. Just anything in particular, Virginia or Nina or Haley?
Yeah, I think you covered it really well, Mindy. Yeah, if there are groups that are interested in participating in this process, please have them connect with us, or we can reach out to them if you let us know who they are. And we're happy to do that.
That's great. I'm not seeing any additional, oh, sorry, go ahead, Haley.
I was just going to say that the only other thing is that, as we put at the beginning, we will have like a full public draft of this that's coming out later in the summer. So that is also another opportunity to provide comments, and we will post that and publicize that when it's out as well.
Great, thank you. I am not seeing any other questions right now. We are going to share out this presentation onto the website. We will have, we're going to make the recordings also available. And the recordings will also be available, so folks who weren't able to attend can listen in and hear on that. Again, we welcome additional comments, feedback. Your insights and thoughts are very, very important. I don't know if Virginia or Nina, you have any other final thoughts before we wrap up today?
I just want to say thank you again to folks for attending, and thank you for your time and your thoughtful input. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, and we'll wrap up then. Have a great day.